I love that I have sponsors for this podcast because that means I get to make a lot more episodes. Now, we all know that healthcare costs are a challenge for most Americans. But what you may not know is that members of Medi-Share save up to 50% or more per month on their healthcare costs. The typical family saves up to $500 per month. If this is your first time you are hearing about Medi-Share, here's a quick summary. It is an affordable, ministry-based alternative to health insurance that allows members to share one another's medical bills, offers access to 900,000 plus healthcare providers, and has a proven 25-year track record. They have a huge community of over 400,000 members nationwide that is there for you when you need it the most. Medi-Share is not insurance, and their members say it's better. If you want to start saving hundreds of dollars per month, you need to take a look at Medi-Share. It only takes 2 minutes to see how much you could save. Check out Medi-Share today. To quickly see your savings with Medi-Share, text John to 474747. Now remember, there's no H in John. It's text JON to 474747. That's JON to 474747. Thanks. Hey everyone, and welcome to the All It Takes Is a Goal podcast. I'm your host, Jon Acuff, and I love goals. Why? Because a goal is the fastest path between where you are today and where you want to be tomorrow. Now, today's episode is a special one because it's my very first interview for my brand new podcast. And today's guest, Billy Ivey, is my very first writing mentor. I met him in 1998 at my first real adult job. Like the first job where you get a business card and you're like, these are amazing. I'm going to give these business cards to everybody. It was my first job. I was a junior copywriter at an ad agency in Birmingham, Alabama. Billy and I became fast friends. He taught me how to structure a sentence, how to write a hook, and why a well-placed joke was often the best way to communicate an idea. He was in my wedding, started a blog with me back in 2001, and remained a constant source of encouragement and inspiration to me over the years. I think what's interesting about this interview is that when I told Billy that I wanted to interview him for my podcast about goals, his wife's response was, "Is this an intervention?" Because Billy would say he's not amazing at goals. I would argue otherwise. I think you'll agree with me once you hear the interview. He's an author, a speaker, and one of the funniest people I've ever met. Get ready to laugh in this one. Ladies and gentlemen, here's my conversation with my good friend, Billy Ivey. Let's just jump right in. I remember an idea you told me about writing years and years ago that I still think about to this day. You said, if you're a better writer than me, I'm probably faster. If you're a faster writer than me, I'm probably a better writer than you. And I love that juxtaposition of speed and quality. So from a writing perspective, what would you say is like one of your mantras?
Oh, gosh. Well, first of all, you're now both better and faster. You seem to have not aged except for your hair. And I am a lot older now. But my mantra for writing, honestly, is I really do try to take my time. I try to take as much time as I can to dive in and understand the story. I think what makes a good writer is experience, but also empathy and being able to really allow yourself to dig in and be a part of that story as opposed to just jumping in and saying what's on your heart or what's on your mind. You know, from an advertising perspective, I spend an awful lot of time on the front end trying to get to know who I'm talking about and why I'm saying what I'm saying, or trying to, as our friend Jesse Palmer used to say, sing the words of their heart.
Did he say that?
Oh, yeah, man. Huh. He used to say, I really need for you to sing the words of their heart, which was corny at the time, but it makes sense.
Yeah, the older you get. And that's the fun thing is I describe you as my writing mentor at my first real adult job. So right out of college, we're both in Birmingham, Alabama. I don't remember what my title was. You were probably a senior writer and I was a junior writer. I don't know what titles we had.
I think we were just both copywriters. I never reached the senior status at that agency.
Yeah. But when I started, I looked at you as somebody who was further down the path, had so much information, and it was so fun to kind of bat ideas around with you and go, okay, that's where it goes. And it's been fun to watch you take these ideas in different directions. On one end of the spectrum is, okay, you've got advertising ideas, but you've actually written a book called A Sea Between.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love it. How did you get involved in that project?
Well, I don't guess it was accident, but the story was brought to me. Some friends of mine in Nashville, actually, Chad and Mary Virginia Frist. Actually, Mary Virginia was actually my high school girlfriend for like 5 years. We dated for a long time, but they came to me and said, "Hey, you're a writer, right?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes." And they said, "Well, we've got a great story we need to tell, and you're the only guy we know who could do it. Would you like to write a book?" And I said, "Well, writer is next to my name after the comma. And so, of course, I want to write a book. Every writer wants to write a book." But I was always expecting it to be my book, my story, or something that I, sort of devised or created in my head. But when I heard this true life story of this Cuban immigrant who escaped Cuba on a boat that he built and worked for years in order to raise enough money to traffic his family out of Cuba. And then they were then held captive in Mexico. And so there's a battle in getting his family together. When I heard this story, it was almost too dramatic and too exciting and too real to be believable, but I had to write it. So it was a situation when they said, "Hey, we'd like to pay you X amount of dollars to do this. There's no timeline. There's no time frame. There's no, we just want to tell the story." And I jumped right in. Took a long time to get it done, though.
Was it hard without a time frame to get it done?
Yeah.
I asked Patsy Claremont, who's a writer, and she's amazing. How do you write best? And she said, under obligation. And I loved that answer. This podcast is all about goals and achieving them and finishing them. How were you able to finish that if there wasn't a time frame?
Quick story. I'll answer that question. But I told my wife, I told Bethany, who said to say hi, by the way, but I told her I was going to be on your podcast. And she said, "Cool. What's it about?" And I said, "Goals." And she paused and just looked at me and said, "So it's like an intervention." Because I might be the world's worst.
You think so?
Oh my gosh, I'm awful at it. I just actually, right before we got on, I was on the phone with the publisher, and they said, just whenever you can do it. We're basically at the epilogue now. I just need to write the epilogue. Whenever you can do it. And I said, I got to tell you, that's just not gonna work for me. I need next Tuesday. I actually need next Tuesday at 10 p.m. I don't need this open-ended.
Just listen to your heart. Listen to the words of your heart.
Yeah. I mean, again, I like to take my time on stuff, and I do, I will take as much time as you give me. So yes, it was very difficult to finish this book without a timeline or a deadline, because then it just becomes heavier and heavier and heavier. And you're able to push things off and able to say, well, I'm going to go fold the laundry instead of sitting down and working on this, or I'm going to go do this, that, or the other thing. And I folded a lot of laundry while I was writing that book.
Yeah, you get real into socks when you try to avoid stuff.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, you're on the edge of the epilogue. That's an interesting segue. Oftentimes, it's the last 5% that it's the hardest 5%. Like in a marathon, I think you see the finish line and you're like, why would I stop now? But sometimes in goals, there's all this pressure. Sometimes you don't want to leave the project because it's been fun and it's sad to see it end. So like for you, how do you not get stuck in the spot of, I just have to write the epilogue, which is like a complete, like 1-page, 3-page summary of the most amazing thing. So I'm just like, no pressure. It's like, I love when people's like, give me your elevator pitch. You have 9 seconds to tell me your idea. I'm like, then it's going to suck because 9 seconds isn't like, I'm not Nike. Like just do it. Took 40 years. Now we believe it. But when he first said it, nobody was like, oh yeah, that makes complete sense. How do you actually get across the finish line, or how are you planning to with this epilogue? First
of all, I had to have them define epilogue for me because I wasn't sure I was like, I finished the thing, I finished it. I wrote the synopsis and the pitch. So why don't you just, this is an interesting scenario and probably not an altogether common one, but this story originally written from 2 perspectives, which we have determined was a pretty complicated thing to ask a reader to wrap their heads around. To read a book or read a novel, read this true story from 2 different perspectives, it's just a little bit confusing. And so throughout the process, I've had to go back and had to change it all to 1 perspective and tell these stories from almost a narrator's standpoint. And then we had to go back and we had to cut out a ton of stuff because the narrator, using the main character as the narrator wasn't working either. And so we had to put everything through the main character's perspective. So it went from a 96,000 word manuscript, and now it's around 65,000 words because we just had to cut out a ton of stuff. So there's an opportunity in the epilogue to sort of to speak to that other character and have them sort of follow up and say what they were feeling at the time or what they're feeling now. So it's a little bit different probably, but your point of the finish line, I mean, I wrote 70% of this book in the first 3 weeks, I feel like. I didn't know how to wrap my head around how to tell this really powerful story. I didn't feel like I was good enough at it. I didn't feel like I was doing it justice. And so every time I would try to end it, it was wrong. Even though it's a true story, I was telling it wrong.
You were telling the wrong part, or you weren't celebrating it the right way.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So the end is the hardest part. A lot of people will say, staring at the blank page is the hardest part. But when you've got a great story and you feel compelled to write it, that was easy for me. It was really easy for me to jump in. It was pretty hard for me to finish.
So if you need a deadline, because I kind of think it's interesting to think through, like, what are the handful of things you require to finish a goal? And you and I are both at the age now where, like, we have some information we can pull from. Like, we have a data set where we can be like, okay, for me, 45 years of life going this way. Why am I surprised? Like, why am I still like, what? I need to run so I stay sane and not stressed out. You're kidding me.
Right.
If you have deadline on that list, like if we said, okay, it's a recipe, what are the ingredients? Like, okay, I need a deadline. I need hours. Like, do you put it on a calendar? Like, what are you doing to kind of set yourself up for success? Again, like, you're facing a real thing. Epilogue is on your plate. You got to do it. Bethany your wife joked about, oh, is this a goal intervention? So, like, what's in Billy's toolkit?
I'm still figuring that out. I'm a young man, but I'm a pretty old guy to be starting out on something, starting out as being an author. And so I'm still figuring a lot of it out. The process has not been at all formulaic for me throughout the process. It's almost unfair to put that in perspective of the entire process, because to finish, I know what I've got to do. You got 4 pages to do this. So I know I got to set up an interview. I've got to probably go to Nashville and conduct this interview, get some information, and then write 4 pages. Writing 4 pages is nothing when you're looking at 300.
Yeah,
I have not at all. And again, this is sort of the comedy of me being on a podcast about goals. I've not found a formula that really works better than others. It's got to take me being intentional, being diligent, and trying to force myself to the table and get it done. The best stuff I ever do is usually at the last minute. And I hate that. I really do hate that. I wish it wasn't true.
I'm working on that. I'm workshopping that idea right now in my own life. The idea of that I have deadline discipline, but not self-discipline. And I want to tweak that.
Oh, man.
I don't want the deadline to create the creativity. And I don't think I can 100% match that, but I think there's things I can do along the way, whether it's fake deadlines. Like, I'm going to test that in the coming year to go like, okay, what is that? Because I think that's true of a lot of creatives. I think it's true of humans.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. I've not talked to a creative, especially writers, who aren't compelled to be creative by deadlines and for me, it's fear. I mean, I got till January 22nd to finish this epilogue. January 22nd, it's not even December 22nd, right? I mean, I got a long time. Yeah. But then you think about, you got the holidays coming in, and you got lacrosse games and wrestling matches and baseball starting up and dance and cheerleading and all this. And all of a sudden, Christmas is over, the New Year's come, and you've got all these other projects coming up. So it becomes, again, this anvil. And I don't even know if I work best. I finish when the anvil is about to drop. Yeah. And I don't like that, but that's just the way it has been. And I'm assuming until you figure it out for me.
I will. That'll be like the 3rd book, hopefully down the line. But it's funny because if you did the math, you have like an hour on a Tuesday, the 2nd week of January. Like, it's, you know what I mean? Like, because you just said, like, this isn't a solo project. So, like, you have to get on somebody's calendar in Nashville. So, you're not doing that before the holidays. Like, people have kind of shut down already. We're recording this in December. And so if you back it out, that's where I think it can get stressful if you're not careful, because then you're like, I have 9 free minutes between now and January 22nd. And the epilogue is going to be like, you just got to believe in yourself. It's going to be a single quote from like Winston Churchill. Yeah. 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 Exactly. So if that's on one end of the spectrum, big goal, huge project. The other end of the spectrum is what you do with napkinisms, where you take single ideas. They're daily still, right? You're doing them daily.
Yeah.
You're doing these daily ideas. How did you get into napkinisms? Tell people a little about that. Explain your heart behind that one.
Yeah. Well, I hesitate to say it's an accidental platform or whatever, because I took something that I was doing every day anyway. Since my kids have been really little, my daughter, who's now, she'll be 21 this week, which is crazy, right?
That's nuts.
Yeah. Since she was 5 or 6 years old, I've been putting little notes or thoughts or even little pictures or hearts or whatever in their lunchboxes. And so it wasn't until it was about 4 years ago now, I wrote a note I thought was particularly funny or insightful. And I took a picture of it and posted it to Instagram. And it got a little bit of traction, and I posted the next one to Instagram, and it got a little bit of momentum behind it. And then, thanks to you and thanks to your platform, you reposted one of these napkins, a stupid napkin. I don't even remember which one it was, but it was not particularly insightful or funny. It was just, hey, this guy does napkin notes for his kids, and you ought to follow him. And it kind of went crazy. The momentum behind the fact that this guy was writing silly stuff to his kids, and sometimes, verging on obscene things to his kids and funny things and insightful things or whatever, people just started following. And as people started following, they started sharing their stories with me. And that was a really, really powerful thing, where I was able to see that this very small thing that I did on a daily basis was making a big impact in some people's lives. And people, again, when they would share their stories, it was remarkable to see how me writing something as silly as, remember, every time you smile, a mean kid gets diarrhea.
That's so good. That might be the title of this podcast episode.
Yeah,
maybe
okay,
that's what.
right.
I haven't titled one before, so we'll see.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we might want to work on that one.
So you put that out in the world, and then somebody goes, "Okay, wait a second. This has a bigger impact than you know."
Yeah, and sent me this 3-page letter about how I'd single-handedly made her reconsider her decision not to have kids.
Wow. Wow.
And what are you talking about? But then she went on to tell her story, and her story was crazy. She grew up in foster homes because her mother was an addict and her dad was abusive in all these ways. And foster home after foster home after foster home was a bad situation. And somehow, some way, this stupid note that I'd put on Instagram or Facebook found its way to her. And she got a new perspective. And she said, maybe one day I'll find a guy who loves me for me. Maybe that guy and I will have kids. And I swear to God, when we do have kids, I'm going to love them. I'm going to be fun with them. I'm going to have happy times. So it started to generate this desire in me it was a desire, but it was also a lot of pressure, right? You know this. You know this better than most. When you start to get a following, the pressure comes, I've got to perform.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So nothing was funny enough. Nothing was inspirational enough. Nothing was good enough. And so I started performing for the wrong audience. And Bethany, in all her wisdom, would say, hey, it really isn't what you write. It's that you write.
Oh, it isn't really what you write. It's that you write.
Yeah.
That's great. God bless that we have awesome wives.
No kidding. No kidding. What do we do? It doesn't make sense to me. But anyway, it just became this different thing, and not have to get too deep into it, but that generated conversations with an employer that we both share, an old employer that we both share, with Chick-fil-A, right? So the Chick-fil-A Foundation reaches out and says, hey, why don't we put some of these napkins in the free lunches that we give kids during the summer here in inner city Atlanta? And I said, cool. And they said, are you sure? And I said, absolutely, I'm sure. And they said, cool, we need 300 notes by Monday.
There's your deadline.
Yeah, that's right. And I did it. I stayed up 3 nights in a row, and I wrote all these notes and sent them off. But the stories that came out of there were equally as powerful as the lady in Houston who wrote to me about having kids. These kids are running around the halls, sharing their notes with each other and saying, Mom, look what I got, look what I got. So you just never know what kind of impact you're going to have. So that summer we did, I say the napkinisms.com. I created this platform where people can send in messages, and I'll write them on a napkin and send them out. But there are over 3,000 kids got a napkinism message that summer. Since then, it's been about like 10,000 kids. And then I had an opportunity to tell the story multiple times. And one of those was with the Children's Hospital here in Birmingham, which is a super big, super influential hospital. And they asked, could you write some notes for our kids? And we created a program where a year ago, January, that we started putting notes on the trays for the kids at the hospital every single day, more than 400 notes a day. We're going to these kids at the hospital. Crazy. And again, stories after stories after stories of, hey, my kid's too sick to read this, but you changed my day.
Wow.
My kid can't read, but my husband and I have been having a really hard time with our kid, and we don't know what to do. And we got this message that just said, try to say I'm awesome 50 times before lunch is over. And we started laughing and we started doing it. And thanks for that. It's just stupid. It's crazy. It's crazy how that thing took off. Great story. It's been a whole lot of fun for me to do. I do have a daily deadline with those. I want to get up and I'll write a message. And my kids, I wouldn't say they've lost complete interest in it, but I've got a much bigger audience, and I feel like it's a neat opportunity for me just to try to be creative every day. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, I love that. What are some of your favorite ones? Because I think every writer has oh, that's a line. It's such a dumb tweet. I did it probably 8 or 9 years ago, and I tweeted, sometimes I worry about the news. Huey Lewis can take care of himself, but those guys are on their own. And like that, it was such a dumb thing, but I still think about it. It still makes me private, like probably got like 10 retweets, but what are some that you're like, oh man, I love this one?
Well, it's funny because again, with the whole performance mentality, right? I mean, my favorite ones aren't the ones that people like the most. My favorites aren't the ones that get re-shared or there are some messages that have been shared, tens of thousands of times on Facebook or through whatever. And I'm always shocked at the ones that do, because you just never know what's going to resonate with people. But the ones I like, obviously, are the ones where I think I'm being funny or I'm making fun of my kids. My kids can take it. They've lived with me their whole lives, and so they can take it. But there was one that I wrote that just said, you might not be as smart as your sister, but she can't eat gluten, so you win.
Did people get mad at that one? Was there anybody?
Yeah, I lost some followers on that. But I mean, you can't argue with the truth in that.
Yeah.
If you had a choice between making an A or eating a donut, you're going to pick the donut. So good for him.
So good. That's so good.
That every time you smile, a mean kid gets diarrhea. I think that one's probably got to be one of my favorite ones too.
Oh, that's good. That feels like a t-shirt. Sure. Have you put any of these on a t-shirt?
No, I haven't. It's funny. A lot of folks have asked, and there for a while I was trying to figure out how to monetize this thing. Cause I don't know. I mean, you might as well get paid for it, paid for doing it. But I think that when I started thinking in that way, it started losing a little bit of its luster for me. I'm just not oriented that way. And that, much to the chagrin of some of my loved ones, my wife in particular, probably, I'm driven by that response, by people sharing their stories with me or people saying thank you. The appreciation is more valuable to me than a lot of this other. So there is a Sellers Publishing, there's a calendar publishing company out of the Northeast. They've put a bunch of these notes in a daily calendar. That's out. You can go, search it now and buy a Lunchbox Lessons, I think is what they titled it. I didn't have a whole lot of control. I just sent them a bunch of napkins. They put it in a calendar and see what happens. But that's the first sort of commercialization of this. Do
you write any of them ahead? Like, what's your process?
I have. Yeah. In fact, I prefer to do that. I prefer to whether it just be the night before or writing a couple, that might get put in. I don't really like being rushed about it because I have sort of committed to posting one every day.
Yeah.
I got into the habit of just choosing some of my favorites from the past year and putting them up there on a Thursday or Tuesday or whatever. That kind of defeats the purpose of it too. I'm trying to be diligent, put something out there every day. And so it's Advent season right now, right? Like you said, we're recording this in December. And so actually it was Bethany's idea. She's like, why don't you try to bring some focus onto Advent and write napkins every day, for the theme of Advent. So the last week was hope, and this week is peace, and next week is love, and then the next week is joy leading up to Christmas. So it sort of helps me to have some parameters to write within. The short answer to your question is, yeah, sometimes I'll write them ahead.
Like if you're going on vacation, will you write 4 or 5 ahead? So that you don't have to do it at the beach?
Yeah, I've done that. We just went on vacation over Thanksgiving. I don't think I didn't post any napkins that week. I posted family pictures that week. So I'm not that strict with it.
You've actually got the best family. I wrote this down. This is, it's here written down. I absolutely love your family except for your sister. Your sister and her husband prank called me once in 2002, and I still have not forgiven them. So
are you serious?
This is less of a question, as more of me just asking you to remind your sister that I don't like her. So the next time you
I don't like her either.
Okay.
I don't like her either.
If it comes up, if you're like, hey, there's a guy that you haven't thought about in 18 years, but he still remembers your prank call, that would be helpful. I'm going to cross that off my list. That was point number 13. A lot of people don't know this. We did have a shared background in that we both used to write for Dan Cathy, the CEO of Chick-fil-A, which was this wild, awesome experience. On the list of billionaires I've spent significant time with, it's him. Like, it's just, if you look at the list, it says number 1, Dan Cathy. There's not a whole lot of people into that. What are some lessons you took from him? Because I think we both got a front seat into some really interesting things.
Yeah, well, I saw the back of Tim Cook's head once when he was here in Birmingham. So
you'd add him to your list? You feel like he's on your billionaire list?
I mean, I saw his head in person.
They say that the head is the shortest path to the heart. A lot of people, the back of the head specifically.
Listen, he's on my Christmas card list now. So
was his address on the back of his head? How'd you get his address? You don't have his address.
It's Cupertino, California. I'm just going to send Tim Cook in Cupertino, California. I think it'll get there.
It'll find him.
Yeah, the question was about Dan Cathy, about Chick-fil-A. I will say that's the single greatest job I've ever had. being able to be a part of that culture, first of all, because it's legit. It is all the good things that you read and all the good things that you hear, that you experience in the restaurants. It comes from a certain place. And I think that starts with him, or obviously with his father, with Truett, but the whole family is fantastic. Thanks to you, you helped make that introduction for me when you were no longer able to engage in that way with them. And so it started a very, very meaningful relationship and meaningful time of my life where I learned a lot about myself. I grew a lot. I mean, I had a built-in billionaire mentor who just shared a lot of his life with me and vice versa. And so we had a really great relationship. Leaving that job to move back to Birmingham and get back into advertising a little bit was one of the most difficult things I've had to do.
I bet. Yeah, it was a fun experience for me too.
Yeah, you had a question in there. I apologize. I probably
No. This is me figuring it out. So piece of paper, insult about your sister. That was really what I wanted to get across today. Good. You've got like 22 kids. It's like 22 or 5. There's a lot of kids.
Somewhere there.
What have you learned as a dad when it comes to inspiring kids with different personalities to chase their dreams, go after goals? Like there's always this fine line between what motivates one kid and completely demotivates the other kid. Like, what have you learned as a dad?
That is a fascinating question, because I don't know that there's not a writing formula that I've ever strictly adhered to, and there's not a parenting formula that I've been able to adhere to either, because like you said, they're all very different. I do have 5 kids, and ranging from 21 to 13. And so my youngest is 13, 7th grader. And there's a few more in between those two. I've actually learned a lot about goal setting, a lot about discipline from my kids. I mean, just in watching how they respond or how they get motivated or inspired to do or not to do something has been a really cool thing. I'm not a hands-off dad. I'm certainly very, very involved, and I try to interject as much as I can. But my 15-year-old daughter, Mary Cannon, is the most goal-oriented and discipline-focused person that I know. She will set her mind to something, and she will accomplish that goal. Everything else be damned. She's just motivated in that way. She's just a go-getter. There's something internal. She has to win. She has to, not in a self-serving way, but she loves to accomplish goals. She loves to set the goals and accomplish those. And that's really fascinating because, I mean, you've known me for a long time. I'm just not that guy. I'm a fly by the seat of your pants. Everything's going to be okay. Positive outlook and idealist. And I've got another kid who's motivated. I think not in a negative way. I don't want to paint a bad picture of him, but fear. His biggest fear is failing. And so being motivated by fear is different from being motivated, by positivity, by accomplishing something. I'm like my 17-year-old son. We are very, very much alike. And I am motivated by positivity, right? So positive reinforcement to me makes me want to do more, do better. But if you tell me I'm not good at something, or you tell me, hey, that's not working out, then I'm going to shut down. It's interesting. I'm not a big Enneagram guy or
yeah. What's your number? Do you know?
I got to tell you, I really
people
don't know.
Guess it? I bet people guess. It's hot in Nashville. Like it's very hot in Nashville.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And it's hot with the 20-somethings for sure, too. I mean, my daughter's big into it. She says I'm a 8 wing 9.
8. I think 8 is like super dominant. So I think that's what that means. Yeah,
maybe
and 9
7.
is the peacekeeper. 7 are like creative, fun-loving, positivity. I'm allegedly a 7, although sometimes I feel like I'm not. I don't know.
1 is the type A.
Yeah.
My wife, there's no question. She's 1.
All 1.
She's all 1. I don't even think she has a wing. She's just
no wings, just up there, aerodynamic. She's not even flying. She's got both her arms tucked in like a missile.
Yeah, there's no coming down on that either.
That's so funny.
But I really don't know. I'm not spending a whole lot of time.
Are you big on other personality stuff? Like, has there been one where you're like, oh, dude, Myers-Briggs, man, changed my life? Or even not even that, like, have you read a book that you saw yourself in and it clarified things for you? Like when I read War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, I was like, oh, okay. Yeah.
That's your book.
Yeah, that is my book. I'm going to jump into a kind of a separate question.
Yeah.
So I wrote a book called Soundtracks, comes out in April. And one of the things that came up in the research is that there's certain songs that impact you the most. And they're usually heard between 13 and 16 if you're a man, and 11 and 14 if you're a girl. Now, it doesn't have to be exactly that, but it's just there's times where a song impacts you more. What's a song that impacted you, like on your short list? And then what's a book maybe outside of that time frame? Like Kurt Vonnegut, I think at one point you would say, oh, man, Kurt Vonnegut. But song and book.
Yeah. I love that you remember Kurt Vonnegut.
Yeah, you traded a backpack for a first edition, but the
I sure
backpack
did.
was more expensive. We found out later that first edition, I don't think it was that expensive.
It's like $12. I could have bought it.
Somebody
for $9.
ripped you off with that backpack trade. This is back in the 90s. People just did this stuff. The backpack trading market. There's no Craigslist. You couldn't review the guy. You couldn't give him a negative review. That dude now owned your backpack.
Yeah. Yeah. He's probably still using it. I have no idea where the book is.
Jeez.
Specific songs, man, that is a tough one. I should have expected the question based off the title of your book and what you're into now. I will say, when I was in high school, U2, I couldn't get enough of U2. Bono was the coolest. I mean, he's still one of the coolest guys ever, but he was so cool. I love the fact that he was a professed Christian, and he was a man of faith, and he wrote this rock and roll music, and he was super cool. I still haven't found what I'm looking for is probably one of my all-time favorite songs of his, and that's just the first thing that came to mind. I certainly wasn't prepared to talk about him, but I think you went in high school for sure, and then in college it was just a potpourri of all. I mean, I listened to everything, and I mean, Public Enemy to the Connells to my friend Steve.
Oh, my friend Steve, yeah, he's an art teacher in Florida. I think I looked him up.
Oh, you did?
Oh yeah, love my friend Steve. We're like the only people.
I know. There's two of us, and his students, I'm sure, like him.
Do you think? Yeah, one of them definitely, with the internet and these kids with their whiz bang TikToks and whatnot. Somebody found it. Somebody found that he was in a band and is, playing Hey Victoria. That was the name of their sad song, by the way. She goes to Paris and dumps him. And she's like, it's going to be fine. It's not going to be fine, Billy. It's not going to be.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
She's gone forever. And now he's teaching art.
Yeah. That's how music comes at you fast. Music. I live in Nashville. I'm surrounded by my friend Steve's. I wrote here, Pearl Jam was one for you.
Oh, man.
How many Pearl Jam albums did you own at your height? Like the height of your Pearl Jam fandom?
All of them.
No, because they came out with like 400 live albums when we were hanging out. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. They would record every concert. They could record every concert. Yeah, then they would release it.
And I swear I'd run into you and be like, man, this new Pearl Jam Wichita just came out. Oh, crazy set list. Crazy. The things they did for those Wichita people. No,
yeah, Pearl Jam for sure. That was obviously more in college in the early 90s, I guess. I was kind of a super fan of Pearl Jam for a while. I couldn't get enough.
I never went to a Pearl Jam show. How many concerts did you go to?
I think I've been to 4 Pearl Jam concerts.
That's not that aggressive.
No, it's not. But I mean, they don't tour a lot around the Southeast. But I saw them in New Orleans. I saw them in Atlanta and I think Nashville. And then I can't remember where the other one was. Maybe Atlanta again. But I was big into the Horde Festival. Remember the Horde Festival and all that? It's like Blues Traveler.
Blues Traveler. Like if you do a list of famous harmonica players from the 90s and 2000s, it's as long as my billionaire list. It's John Popper. And then that one song where somebody gave Alanis Morissette a harmonica for like 10 minutes.
Yeah. She was cool too. Like, gosh, I miss.
We grew up in the festival age. Like we were. Like Lilith Fair. Like there were so Lollapalooza. Like there were so many different many festivals when we were coming up.
I was going to say, as far as books go, I will say I was a huge fan of Vonnegut because I just liked how just irreverent he was, and he was just weird and wrote funny stuff that you had to figure out. But when I read Blue Like Jazz the first time, I really did see myself in that book. And it's not because he's not great. Donald Miller's a great writer. He's a really good storyteller, but he's an everyman writer. You don't have to be a Mensa to understand his books about life and faith or whatever. So I found myself in that, and it really did make me think that I could do that.
Yeah, I think that I completely get what you're saying. And for me, it was that he broke all these rules I didn't even know I had. Where it was like, it felt like a conversation.
Yeah, that's right.
It wasn't a book written to be like, I'm on a pedestal, I wrote a book. It was more like, if we were having a conversation, here's the things I'd say, and they'd be meaningful. And that's where I was like, oh, I didn't even know we were allowed to write books like that. Like
That's right. It
twisted the genre for me. Like, that's what I liked about it.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Several of his books, Tone of Dragon, just was fascinating to me. Talking about its father and the idea of a father, and then Million Miles in a Thousand Years. Did I say that right?
Million Miles in a Thousand Years?
Million Miles in a Thousand Years, yeah. Or is it the other way around?
I don't know.
1,000 Miles in a Million Years, whatever. It's a great book, though. Anyway.
Speaking of family, you have a bracelet. You're not a big jewelry guy. You don't have a necklace on right now, right?
No.
Okay, me either.
No chance.
I'd like to have a friend who's a jewelry guy, but like not super over the top about it. Like he's just like, he wears jewelry and I appreciate that, but we'll see.
Yeah.
You have a bracelet that says, I want to make sure I get this right. Love like Mimi.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you?
My mother, Mimi was my mom, and she passed away 2 years ago, April. And the thing about her, she had a depth and a way of loving people that I've just never seen before. She was a very faithful person, but her ability to accept and to see the good in people, as dark as they may be, to find that little sliver of light in people, it was just incredible. And so after she passed away, her favorite color was this blue, and I just had a bunch of bracelets. We handed them out at her memorial service, and it was, most people don't wear them still, I'm sure. I mean, it's been a couple of years, but I love wearing it because it is a reminder, not in a sappy way, but just it's a reminder to me that there really is good in everybody. There's a lot of bad, and there's a lot of folks I'd rather not spend my day with, but everybody's living a story that I'm not completely familiar with, and I don't know all the chapters to, and just to love people for who they are. And I posted something the other day. It's just, don't just accept people for their differences, love them because they're different. And I think that's something that my mom just imparted to me. And so I wear the bracelet, though, because I like people asking about it. It's a good conversation starter. I'm able to talk about my mom every once in a while.
Yeah, I love that. I saw you post that. I knew it was going to be one of the questions I asked. Mm-hmm. It feels like it's the kind of bracelet that, especially after the year we've had, where like it doesn't feel like we could be more divided. That the idea of like, okay, seeing the good in other people. How do you suggest people do that? Like, let's say that's your goal. I've seen people say, my goal is to assume the best or have the best intent or assume a positive intent. I had a friend work at the Apple store, and that was one of their mantras. Assume a positive intent, because sometimes when people come into the Apple store, their computer is on fire, they're mad, like how would you say, okay, here's a way you can do that. Here's the way you can see the best in somebody.
I'll be the first to say I suck at it. I think we share the burden of sarcasm. I think we're just naturally sarcastic and cynical people. And sometimes that can be used for good in comedy, but other times it can be used to sort of be a real downer. It dampens my mood more often than not because I'm always looking for the line or looking for the next joke or how to interject something that might be cutting but funny. That said, I think for me, it really is, and I would attribute it to napkinisms. I would attribute it to the stories that other people are telling me, that you really don't know what's going on in somebody's heart, in somebody's head, in somebody's home. And if you are able to approach each day and each person in each situation, I mean, my gosh, you go to a meeting around a conference table and there's 7 people in there. Those are 7 different stories that have been impacted by hundreds of different people. And so, my gosh, I think of my day and the amount of people that I see, most of whom live in this house, all these people, but what are the experiences of their day? How can I set their day off on a positive note, literally and figuratively? But I think it really is just being open and trying to be compassionate. Compassion is a big deal to me. I want to be better at it. Unfortunately, in some circumstances, I think I'm an empathetic person because I've been through a lot and I've seen a lot, and I've been through a lot of hard things, but a lot of positive things too. And so that also makes you a better writer and a better creative when you're able to really connect and be empathetic with folks. But I don't know. I mean, I really do think if you're able to just pause before the reaction, before the cynical comment, before the sarcasm, before the joke, and realize that there's a story there. We're all living one, and we all have different chapters and different characters who are influencing that. I think that's changed my attitude an awful lot as I've gotten older over the past several years, just understanding that we're all, it sounds so corny and cliche, especially in these unprecedented times, if you will.
Somebody told me these infectious times in an email. They said, in these infectious times, I was like, that ain't it, homie.
That's not it.
That's not the phrase.
We got to figure out a way to quit saying unprecedented.
I think at this point, we're like a year in. It's just like, hey, how are you? Do you open your emails with any like inane kind of phrases? Because I found myself saying, hope you had a great weekend. Like a lot, like up till Tuesday, I'm saying that. And then like Wednesday, I shift to, hope you're having an awesome week. Do you do any of that?
Not intentionally, not intentionally, but yeah, I've caught myself. I've said, hope you had a good week, or I hope you have a good weekend on a Tuesday. I've just lost all sense.
Just a lot of lead up. You want to give them like a 3-day window to get their act together so they can have a good weekend.
I know I'm not wearing pants tomorrow, but I shouldn't assume that.
I don't want to assume something for you. You might even put on a belt.
Right.
Nice.
That's right.
Nice. Okay. Last 1 or 2 questions. what do you have planned for the year? So, we joked about your wife saying goal intervention. Are you the kind of guy that's like, you know what? I got a brand new year. I'm going to write some goals. I'm going to think through some stuff. Like this will probably go live in like January-ish. If I've recorded it remotely correctly. But like, what are your goals for the year? Or even, do you ever look ahead and go, by 50, I want to be blank? Like, or when the kids are out of the house, like, tell me some of like how you dream about goals.
I mean, we've already established I'm not a goal setter, or I'm not a goal accomplisher.
I feel like you are.
I wanted to run a marathon by the time I was 40. And I'm 48 and I haven't even run. I ran a 5K when I was 46, so.
Did you really want to though? That's
a great question. And I think I don't want to get too deep here at the very end of our conversation, but what's the difference between a desire and a goal? Because I feel like I have a desire. To be, I'm 6'3" already, but 190 pounds and be just absolutely yoked. And, I have a desire to write 3 books next year. Is the difference selfishness versus self-improvement? Or like what's I actually asked that question the other day because I feel like every goal is not really a goal. It's a desire. And that comes from a selfish place.
Wait, every one of yours for you?
I feel like that. Yeah. For me, I feel like that. I went through a thing with church called Battle for the Heart. And there's just one, I don't remember most of it, but there was this one exercise that we went through. And it was like, what do you want? And then you say, I want to write a book. Well, what would that get you? Right. So the question was, that would get me, published. Well, what would that get you? Well, that would get me notoriety. Well, what would that get you? Well, that would get me money. And well, what would that get you? Well, that would help me buy a lake house. And what would that get you? It would make the weekends more fun. And what would that get you? Well, my wife wouldn't be crazy. So the point of that exercise was to go, hey, what do you need? Are all these wants or these desires, are they selfish? And what does that get you? Versus a goal, like what's the point? I'm not trying to be so cynical to say, well, what's the point in having a goal? I mean, what's it get you? I'm not saying that, but there is a fine line, in my opinion, of what is the ultimate purpose of a goal? Yeah. Is it self-help? Is it self-realizing that you were made for something bigger? You know what I mean? That these are big concepts. And so, like I said, I don't want to throw it out there at the end of this, but speak to me, teacher.
No, I think it's interesting because I think there's like buckets of evangelical shame around goals that like, and I'm not saying you, I'm just in the church in general. It's like whenever somebody goes, oh, happiness is useless, only joy. You can tell they have neither. Like if you're arguing with me that I use the word happiness and not joy, like you have neither. That's not a fun conversation. I think there is a sense of, I think there can be selfish goals. I think you can chase them for the wrong reasons. I think you can get things that you didn't really want and kind of catch them and go, oh, I didn't really want this. Mm-hmm. But I think you can also say, I have a desire to run a marathon, but it's just something fun to say. And that's okay. Like that's enough that I get to think that. But I think there's other times where you go, I'm going to write a book because I have a story inside me and the process of writing it will change me and change what I do. And I'll feel communion, whatever the phrase is. I always kind of pull back because we both have a faith background where it is that sense of, you shouldn't have a goal or you shouldn't have like desire is bad. Like, there's just a lot of that exists in the church that I don't think helps people long term.
I 100% agree with that.
I think if we received a task, like if it was all task based all the time, that wouldn't reflect what the faith really is. Like it's not that, it's a gift, And so I think that's fascinating because it's not selfish. If I said to you, Billy, what are your goals for the year? And your first response is, I don't want to be selfish, so I can't have any. I'm not saying that's what you said, but I think there are people that go, well, I just, I can't. I've got 5 kids. I've got, I just having this sweatshirt on feels like a goal enough today. It's comfortable, and you go, no, there's more to that. So I don't know. Where are you on the it's selfish, it's not selfish scale?
I've not really thought about that before. I only thought about that just the other day as we were talking about having this conversation. Because my biggest fear in this conversation was for you to say, "What's your big goal for 2021?"
Yeah, dude, that question terrifies me. Like, believe me,
I would love to write another book, and I would love to write my book. Not that A Sea Between is not going to be my book, but I would like to write my story.
You didn't escape from Cuba. That I'm aware of. On a personal level. That's right. I know you've been there because I've seen
I've never even met a pirate. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And the reason for that is because I do think that telling my story could impact and influence and make a difference in the lives of other people. There is a perspective that can be tapped into when you are able to share in other people's stories. And so I do, and I think that I've been gifted with a talent or with the ability to string sentences together and make people feel something. And so that's a goal. I want to write that book, right? Ask me why. I want a book show. I want my name on a book.
Yeah, heck yeah. It's awesome. It's a great feeling.
But I totally agree. I mean, there are some, I say selfish. I mean, it's not selfish because it's therapeutic and it can be good for your health. But I want to go on a couple of vacations this year. I want to be able to escape with my family or with my wife and go on vacation. Well, there are practical and just very, very simple steps that need to be taken in order to make that happen, right? You got to save, you got to work, you got to get the projects so you can save and work. So there are very practical things you can do in order to accomplish that goal. If I don't accomplish that goal, am I going to be a failure for the year? Absolutely not. I will have missed that opportunity to engage in that way. But when it comes to real, powerful, meaningful goals, that is life-changing or world-changing, I have a hard time wrapping my head around.
Yeah, and I wonder. Yeah, I think there's a bunch of questions around that because I think there's like you can ask why in a good way, but you can also ask it in like, why do I need to explain? Like, if I want to do it, that's enough reason. Like, I'll go off on a vision quest and feel like I have to justify it. But I also think you could say, like, having your wife laugh the way she laughed when you danced with your oldest daughter on the beach. Like you did a video, she laughed, she cackled.
Yeah.
Your daughter was willing to do that with you, was like willing to go along with that. So it was like you were on vacation, your daughter was game, your wife cackled. You don't laugh loudly with people you don't love. Like you just don't. And so like there were like 5 goals wrapped up in that. So I think part of it sometimes is going, I'm doing goals all the time that I don't even understand. Like there's a lot of dads that would be jealous of going, like my kid didn't have headphones in and wasn't in another world trying to ignore me because I ignored her for 13 years and now I'm trying to reconnect and it's hard. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So I look at that, I'm like, that's a huge goal. You're going to finish the book in January. That's a huge goal. And you write a manuscript. But I think the question of, well, why do you want to do it? Or what, did you say the question was, what do you get? Like, what does that get you?
On that particular retreat is like, what would that get you? And obviously the purpose of that was to say, you have everything you need.
Yeah. You're already there.
Yeah, and I don't think it was necessarily meant to make you feel bad about having wants and desires, but it's probably supposed to take you away from the sense of entitlement that a lot of us have when we say, well, I deserve to accomplish that goal, or I deserve this, that, and the other thing. Yeah. And there is a difference there too, right? I mean, you got to hustle, you got to have the grind, you got to put in the work, you got to be smart, you got to study, you got to be a student of your trade. All of these things in order to allow you to accomplish the things you want to accomplish. It's just sometimes I have a hard time categorizing what do I even want to accomplish? Again, I'm not saying I'm alone in that. I'm probably a lot more in community with most people who will hear this. That hey, I don't know what I want either.
Well, and for me, I do feel a lot of pressure with that question. If the only world that changes is your own, that's enough. So like when somebody goes like, tell me your craziest, I think that can be a lot of pressure because you're like, well, I got to like build schools somewhere, like by my own hands, and I'm going to have to like do farm to table bricks. Like I need to do a like, and you go, oh my gosh, we're like being present in your own family can be an amazing goal. Like finishing the book because you knew you had to finish it, or just even having a writing habit. Yeah. I think it's really interesting. All the stuff that's wrapped up in that.
Well, and I don't necessarily bring it back full circle to me, but
you are the person I'm interviewing. So
yeah, that's true. That's true. So why don't you stop talking for a second and I'll get on with it. Just kidding. One of the things that I preach to myself and when I go and speak and when talking about the napkinism story or whatever is I do think that we have fooled ourselves. We as a culture, we as a people, not just we or Christians or Southerners or people who are creative or whatever. We fooled ourselves though into thinking you have to do world changing things to change the world. Right. And I don't think that's true. And coming from a guy who writes stupid stuff on napkins at his kitchen table, who is hearing and getting stories of people whose days have been changed. Right. And you never know what that day can do for someone. What does that day do for the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day? And so I do, on the heels of me asking those questions about what's the goal, what's the purpose or whatever. Another thing I say, one of the tweetable things I say, and it's been said before, but it's you don't have to do something grand to do something great. You just got to show up, do the thing you've been called to do and do it with excellence. And things will change. Things will happen for you. the stories of life change or day change that has come out of the napkinisms thing is ridiculous. I never intended to change anybody's life or anybody's perspective on having kids or having a family or any of that stuff when sitting down to write those notes. But it really does make a difference when you show up and you do the thing you feel called to do. In the goals that I have for myself, I think it's tapping more deeply into what have I been called to do? What do I feel compelled to do? And showing up and doing that thing with excellence, I think that's probably my biggest goal if I were to bring it back.
That's great. That's a great place to end too. What a good conclusion. Well, Billy, this has been a blast for me. I
appreciate it.
I think people are going to love it. Last question, where can people find out more about your work? Like, this is the softball, send them to Instagram. What do you want them to go?
At WRIV, IVEY, at WRIV on Instagram, on Twitter. There's also an @napkinisms Instagram, but it's usually just a repost of what I posted on my personal page. And there's a napkinisms.com website that shares a lot of that story, and there's opportunities to engage there. I do love nothing more than going out and telling that story. And so speaking engagements have been few and far between here over the past several months, but I do love getting out and tell that story. So there's information about it on there as well. There's a blog on there where I share some of these silly stories with these kids that I live with and on a daily basis. So there's plenty of ways for you to engage and take a look, but I would say Google napkinisms or go to napkinisms.com and you can find out an awful lot.
Awesome. Well, Billy, thanks so much for joining me on the All It Takes Is a Goal podcast, man.
Thank you, John.
This episode of the podcast was brought to you by Metashare. Text Jon, Jon, to 474747 for more information. Huge thank you to Metashare for sponsoring it. Jon to 474747.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about the All It Takes Is a Goal podcast and to get access to today's show notes, transcript, and exclusive content from Jon Acuff, visit acuff.me/podcast. Thanks again for joining us. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode of the All It Takes Is a Goal podcast.